Our last episode about Diddy really got some serious conversation going, especially those accusations from 2001. It definitely brought some unsettling patterns to light. And,
yeah, and it got us thinking about, some other stories about Diddy and his interactions with, especially, younger male artists, kind of getting their start.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today.
Yeah?
We've got articles, interviews, social media posts, a lot to unpack here, so buckle up, because this deep dive is all about uncovering those patterns.
Yeah.
Really dissecting what's said and what's not said in these accounts about Diddy.
Yeah, we're going, beyond the headlines here, right? Looking for the deeper meaning and hopefully, offering some unique perspectives that you're not going to find anywhere else.
Somewhere between the edge of being alive and feeling dead.
Okay, let's kick things off with Usher.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't talk about R&B without Usher.
Absolutely.
What's interesting here is that his path to stardom involved actually living with Diddy when he was just 14 years old.
Wow.
This was back in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
The era of Puffy Flavor Camp, which was this kind of mentorship program that Diddy ran.
I mean, imagine being 14 years old and being thrust into that world. I mean, the allure is undeniable, the luxury, the celebrity encounters, learning from, one of the biggest names in music. It's got to be, at least on the surface, a dream come true for a young artist.
Oh, totally. But here's the thing. Years later, Usher actually made some comments about his time at Puffy Flavor Camp. And he was kind of vague. He mentioned some, curious things that he admitted he didn't fully grasp at the time. But what's really striking is that he said he would not put his own kids in a similar situation.
See, that's where things get really interesting, right? He's not coming right out and making any direct accusations, but the implication is definitely there, something wasn't quite right.
Right.
And to fully kind of grasp that, we need to think about the backdrop of the music industry, particularly in the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was notorious for its exploitative practices, especially towards young artists.
Right.
So Usher's reluctance to put his own kids in that same scenario, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it's like this subtle warning, but it's all kind of shrouded in secrecy. And this pattern of Diddy taking young artists under his wing, showering them with attention gifts, seems to repeat itself, with Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
Discovered crazy young, Diddy was right there, promising Bieber, the world, a Ferrari at 18, a mansion later on.
And remember Bieber's, very public struggles later on.
Oh, yeah.
He's even hinted at being hurt by the people that he trusted. Now, again, we're not saying that Diddy is the direct cause of any of Bieber's troubles, but it does raise some questions about the psychological effects of these types of relationships, right? I mean, imagine. You're young, you're impressionable, you're often isolated from your regular sports systems, and you're suddenly thrust into this world of extreme wealth and influence.
Yeah, a recipe for potential disaster, some might say. And this is where I think the idea of grooming comes into play. And I don't necessarily mean in the overtly criminal sense,
Right.
but this subtler form of manipulation. Control over career choices, isolating them from their support networks, things that might not be illegal, but definitely raise some ethical flags.
Yeah. It's about building trust, yes, but maybe with some manipulative undertones, right?
Right.
Again, we have to be super careful about jumping to conclusions without having, concrete evidence.
Of course.
But these stories, these recurring themes, they force us to really look at the responsibilities that people with power have over young talent, especially in an industry that is known for its pressure.
Yeah, it's almost like this pressure cooker where, saying no to someone like Diddy, it feels almost impossible, especially for a young artist who's trying to make it.
Yeah, and it's those unspoken pressures and that power dynamic that leads us to one of the most serious allegations against Diddy. And this one comes from his former bodyguard, a guy named Gene Deal.
Okay, so this one involves the rapper J. Rule, and it's really important for us to approach this, with some caution. Because we're dealing with a single, unverified account here.
Right.
There's no corroborating evidence.
Yeah.
There's no independent witnesses that have come forward. Right, so Deal claims that back in the early 2000s, he was with Diddy and J. Rule, and they were on a trip for a show. And he says he saw Diddy buy a large quantity of sex toys.
Okay.
And that Diddy took these items with him to the show. He goes on to allege that Diddy then went into a private room with J. Rule. And that J. Rule later, warned Deal, don't go in that room.
Yeah. consider the motivations behind this kind of accusation, right? Like, why would someone come out and say something like this publicly if it wasn't true?
It makes you wonder if it wasn't true, why would he say it?
Right, exactly. And there are a few possibilities here. Maybe he's seeking attention. Maybe he's trying to profit off of this past connection to Diddy.
Sure.
Maybe there's a personal grudge there, a desire for revenge, or maybe he really is trying to damage Diddy's reputation.
Right.
But we also have to acknowledge that there's always that chance that, he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the nature of these deep dives.
Right.
We're often confronted with these unsettling possibilities, these gray areas where definitive answers, they just don't exist. But it is crucial to, acknowledge the complexity, acknowledge these different perspectives, and ultimately allow you, the listener, to kind of draw your own conclusions.
Right. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a more recent situation involving Diddy and his alleged connection to the rapper YK Osiris.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because it kind of brings together a lot of the themes that we've been discussing today, mental health, power dynamics, those immense pressures of the music industry, and it kind of all played out very publicly on social media.
Right, so for those who don't know, YK Osiris had this really intense meltdown on Instagram Live. I think this was back in 2022. And he was clearly in a lot of distress. He was talking about feeling isolated, like no one in the industry actually, cared about him. It was really, really hard to watch.
Yeah, and this wasn't just, a celebrity having, a public moment on the internet. I mean, he talked about literally driving to the Beverly Hills Center. He made some comments that some people interpreted as, potentially suicidal.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he appears to have gotten the help that he needed, but it was a stark reminder of the intense pressure that these young artists are under.
And that's where this Diddy connection comes into play. Because there were all these rumors circulating that Osiris had recently been on a trip to Jamaica with Diddy. Now, Osiris denies this. He says he was there with his girlfriend. But, it still ignited all of the speculation online.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why people made that connection.
Right.
I mean, we just spent, this whole time talking about these patterns of behavior, these allegations of Diddy getting close to, specifically, these young male artists.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's this pattern, right, of Diddy getting close and then these artists having, like, these very public struggles, whether it's emotional breakdowns, substance abuse, or just, like, this unease.
Right, yeah. It's this pattern it's hard to ignore it. And like you said, while we can't definitively link Diddy to, like, the personal struggles of every artist, it is really important to kind of analyze these situations within this framework, right? Of power dynamics, the pressures of the music industry, and then you have the Sukiana incident, which, complicates things even further.
Oh yeah, talk about bringing all these tensions to the surface.
Exactly. So we see Osiris at this event, and he attempts to, forcibly kiss the reality TV star Sukiana.
Oh, right.
And of course, it's caught on video, it goes viral, and there's this huge backlash, right? People are, questioning his judgment, his behavior.
It was a bad look, for sure.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it made them re-examine that Diddy connection, right? Was this a case of a young artist maybe trying to emulate someone that they saw as a mentor, even if that mentorship had some, questionable elements to it?
Right.
And again, we can't say for sure, but what we do know is that, this event with Osiris's very public struggles, it just kind of shines this light, right, on these darker aspects of the music industry.
Yeah.
It forces us to ask these tough questions about how young artists are treated, the pressures that they're facing, and the very real potential for exploitation.
Which brings us back to, I think the heart of this entire deep dive. Why are we even having this conversation about Diddy?
I think because these stories, these patterns of behavior, they deserve to be discussed. They force us to look at this industry, an industry that, we both know and love, and really ask some tough questions about power, about responsibility, about the need for change.
So there you have it, our deep dive into these claims, these controversies, all surrounding Diddy and his interactions, specifically with young male artists. We've covered a lot today, and we really want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this? Join the conversation down in the comments. Let us know. We're going to be back with another deep dive soon, but until then, thanks for listening.